Woiwod?
Correct? Woiwod.
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 Right.
We could Polish name from way back.
Right.
But I'm not indigenous. Some people think because you have a name like Woiwod that you're probably indigenous.
It does sound so. I thought it might have been given to you.
Yeah, so you're going to ask me a big question or what?
I'd like to know a little bit about the walk to Coranderrk.
You mean the walk?
Was that from Acheron or
the walk way back 150
way back 150 years ago?
Yes, well, yes, I can help you there. Probably the best way to understand it in the context of what was happening in the white world, our world, and you remember that Melbourne was founded in 1835. By 1851, most of the Wurundjeri people are gone. Because of disease, because of loss of land, separation from culture, they had it hard. For those years, they did it terribly hard and a lot died. So by 1851, there's probably only about 36 left. They're William Thomas's figures. He's the man that did the counting. He did censuses, and he's the most accurate figure we have. So, but most of those Wurundjeri people are not in the Yarra Valley. It's all too hard for them here. The settlers have taken their land.
They've taken
the government's
the
doing
best bit of the land. Yeah.
They had no land given to them. A couple of times land had been given to them, like Narry Warren for a few years, but that soon closed. Merry Creek for a few years. Warren died far too late, 1852, before that happened. So most of them have left the Yarra Valley. They found that up in the Upper Goulburn, life's a lot easier. There's a few friendly squatters there. They get a bit of work. It's not as closely settled. And it's really in their own country because the Upper Goulburn people are very closely related to the Wurundjeri. Most of the Wurundjeri wives would have come from the Upper Goulburn. So the same people, but just slightly removed. So things are pretty hard. In 1859, they heard word that the government was willing to give them some land. So 7 of them walked from up near the Acheron River, Buxton Way, and walked down to Melbourne and they knocked on the door of William Thomas and said, look, we believe the government will give us some land, we want some land, and we've chosen some land up on the Acheron River. And William Thomas was one of the good guys. He'd worked with them for about 25 years. He knew them personally. He immediately took them around to the Lands Department and they signed the papers. Everything was done in a matter of 2 or 3 days. And they then returned up to the Acheron River where the rest of their people are. William Thomas followed. He had a horse and cart, I think, that he followed. And he arranged to have a surveyor survey the land. So they got roughly 5,000 acres of land that they actually marked the corner trees on. They said, this is the land we want, and we want to farm it like white farmers. It was all fixed. And with them is John Green. John Green was a lay preacher, and he'd been working with them on Brushy Creek and Warriallock and different places over a few years prior to that. And he'd been appointed Inspector of Stations for the Board for the Protection of Aborigine. So he'd been up there on the Acheron River with them for quite a while, with his wife and 3 children, I think it is. But they hadn't been on that station for very long, and the local squatters decided they just didn't like blackfellas on the land next to them, and they pushed them off it. They were powerful people. Though the government had given them land, they were the power in the land. The government didn't have a lot of power away from Melbourne. and they just simply pushed them on. And they said, look, there's better land further up in the mountains. They didn't want to go further up in the mountains, but they had no alternative. The squatters drove their stock through the thing, broke down the fences. They'd already started growing crops, so they moved on to the station further up the Mohican River. Not very far up, but it was land that was that much colder and that didn't suit them. And even there, they gave them a hard time. John Green realised that this was never going to work, so he suggested to them that they go back to the Yarra and he'd find land for them on the Yarra. So it was about 40 of them. Well, the leading light then was Simon Wonga, William Barracks there beside him. They're a mixture of Goulburn people and Wurundjeri people, children, old people. The government had sent up some farming equipment, like ploughs and different stuff that they needed. So they decided they'd take it all back down to the Yarra. So they set out, and Mary Green, John's wife, is there. She's got a baby only a couple of months old. They all went back together. Took them a couple of weeks to get back because there's no real tracks. And they made their way through the mountains, and on the way back to the Yarra, they met up with two packers who were carving a track out from the Watts River to Woods Point. They were pioneering a track. And back on the New Chum Creek, just outside Hillsborough, there was no Hillsborough, nothing. No house, no road, nothing at all. New Chum Creek, there's a few teams of bullockys there waiting to get through to have the track opened up. And so they would just tell John Green and his people what was happening. Anyway, they pushed on and they arrived back on the Watts River, very close to where the walk will be starting next Sunday. And John Green rode on into Melbourne, and he had pretty influential friends there, and he spoke to William Thomas and to the Chief Secretary, and they got land. And the land was where Coranderrk is today. At this stage, you can see them pretty disheartened in a way. Everywhere they went, they got pushed on. Initially, at that stage, the next move was going to be to Wooriyallock, but then gold had been discovered on Britannia Creek, so Wooriyallock's out. So anyway, John Green negotiated this land, and he was very careful of the land that he negotiated for. He wanted to have land away from. He knew what would happen on the Watts River, that a town would appear there very soon, and it would get bigger, and there'd be pubs and all that. He didn't want to be near that, and but there was a bend in the river 4 or 5 kilometres further south, and that was the land he negotiated for. It had a river frontage, so it was protected on one side, and had Mount Tootawong on one side, and it was pretty well protected from pushy white people. So they headed off there. Anyhow, that was 1863. We're not too sure whether it was February or March, but it was in that area. There's no date put on it. There's about 40 of them. Some had been left behind on the Acheron River. Some of the older people who said, look, we'll follow, you go ahead and we'll follow, and they did. So within a few weeks, there's probably 60 to 80 on the land. There's no name for it, and they're a mixture of Goulburn people and Yarra people, and the Goulburn people said, look, we'd like to call this land Garinga. It's the name of the mint bush, cross transfer. It was in flower at the time, and the Wurundjeri said, yes, the idea is good, but our name for that plant is Coranderrk, the name is Coranderrk. So the territorial imperative held, and they won the day. Although they're in the minority, they won the day. So then of course, how do you establish? They set about building cottages for a start. Well, when you see one of the early photographs, there weren't really cottages at all. They were the bark willems that they traditionally used. But over the following months, each of them were able to get a cottage. They had 9 cottages, so quite a few of them still making do with the old bark set shelters. Within a couple of years, they got 23 cottages. These are built along early settler lines, out of bark and slabs, and each of them had a chimney, each had 2 rooms. John Green's overseeing it. I mean, he's not doing the work, they're doing the work. But they were very determined to operate Coranderrk the same as any other white station